Let's talk about certifying your digital asset as accessible. I get asked about certification frequently, and there are many details that website owners and digital asset owners are unaware of, but they need to be aware of when seeking out certification. So let's go over those details now. On the screen with me is an accessible.org blog post titled The 5 WCAG Conformance Statement Requirements. So one thing to be aware of is that there are different types of documentation that can either have the effect of certification or they are actually certification. One of these documents is a statement of conformance, and it is a construct of the W3C. W3C stands for the World Wide Web Consortium, and the W3C, through their Web Accessibility Initiative, WAI, has set out requirements for issuing a statement of conformance. So this, again, it's a construct of the W3C. You are bound by these requirements when you are issuing a statement of conformance. And a statement of conformance is equivalent to certification, because what is happening is you have a document that is stating that your digital asset is fully conformant with a given version and conformance level of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And any issuer who is issuing a statement of conformance needs to follow the 5 requirements that the W3 has set out. I am not going to go over those requirements now, but I will link to this blog post in the description. Now, we'll tab to another accessible.org blog post. This time, the title is VPAT and Certification, What an ACR Actually Means. So many people think that VPATs are certification, and they're not. So one technicality here, the terms VPAT and ACR are used interchangeably, but a VPAT is just the template, and an ACR is actually what you are looking for, because an ACR is the filled in and completed template. But the two terms are used interchangeably. It's important to know that an ACR, a VPAT, they are not certification, but they can have the effect of certification, because what happens if you have an ACR that states that your digital asset, your product or service is fully conformant with the technical standard for that VPAT edition, then it's going to have the effect of certification, because you have a document that states that your digital asset is fully conformant. Now, VPATs are not generally for websites. They can include websites and web pages, so long as those websites and or web pages are part of a product or service. But VPATs are for products and services. So a great example would be software. So a VPAT is not specifically for a website. Just keep that in mind. But an ACR is extremely compelling documentation, and it is also multi-purpose and multi-benefit, because oftentimes procurement agents will ask you for an ACR. And so if you have an ACR that shows that you are conformant with a technical standard, or you're highly conformant with that technical standard, it's going to go over well for you. All right, so one really important aspect of certification is the issuer matters. The issuer needs to be reputable. You need to have a reputable issuer. You want a company who is issuing, who has experience in this space, and you want someone who is issuing who has a good reputation. So this gets into, if we go back a step, this gets into why when you get an ACR, you want to get it independently issued, because if you are issuing your own ACR, it's not going to have nearly the effect that you would want it to. Now, when speaking about reputation, I'm tabbing now to overlayfactsheet.com. You don't want to get certification from an overlay widget vendor, or anyone who is selling any type of automatic or instant solution, quote unquote solution, for compliance or accessibility or WCAG conformance. You do not want that, because the reputation isn't there. And anybody who is familiar with accessibility is going to recognize that right away. In fact, I'm on overlayfactsheet.com right now, and this is a really, really good and informative website that is very helpful. But I'm going to scroll all the way down, and here we have the signatories to the overlay fact sheet. And these signatories are basically stating that they are anti overlays. And we have nearly 1,000 accessibility professionals who have signed this document and they have stated multiple things regarding overlay widgets, but one is that they will never recommend them. So my point being here, you don't want certification from any company that is associated with an overlay or an overlay widget because it's just not going. They just have a bad reputation, and anybody who's aware of accessibility is going to know that. So this also gets at if any if there's any vendor, any provider, any company who is overly eager to issue certification, if they are willing to give it very easily, then that's also a very big red flag against getting certification from that provider. But I'm just going to scroll down now for effect. These are mostly these signatories, these names are mostly accessibility professionals. And so this is telling you, right? This whole overlay fact sheet, if you want to spend 30 minutes reading it, you can. But this whole website exists to point out how overlays and overlay widgets are fundamentally flawed. So if there is any company, any provider, any vendor who is um, actively promoting widgets as a quote unquote solution for accessibility and compliance, then disregard them and go with another company. So yeah, it's almost this is currently at 968 signatories. So there's a lot of literature against overlay widgets, even though they have been promoted extensively. All right, and so now I've tabbed to an image, and here we have a graphic titled Certification of Accessibility. And then I have here Stay Solid, and then keep in mind that certification loses freshness the moment a change happens. So one let's call it a nuance. One nuance of certification is that you can get certification, but it's only as good as the last time your digital asset was audited. And so if there are any new accessibility issues, obviously the certification is not going to cover that. And so if, let's say, your team edits your website, they add in content, the content has an accessibility issue, then obviously the certification has lost freshness. Actually, the certification has lost freshness the moment you make a change, because even if that change is fully conformant with the web content accessibility guidelines, we still need to have that that issuer of the certification go and review that change. So this is where it becomes difficult with certifying accessibility, is that you can't possibly always have a continuous certification. So it's only going to be good as of a certain date, and then it's only going to stay fresh so long as no changes have been made whatsoever. No, even if it's a very minor change, even if it's just changing the text, the issuer would still need to be aware of it. So freshness is definitely a consideration when it comes to accessibility. This is why a fresh document is going to be more compelling than a document than let's say is a year old or a year and a half old. And so keep this in mind. I have here Stay Solid, and that's getting at not using a, the companies with a bad reputation. So a few more details that I have here on the graphic. No ambiguity. So if you see certification that has the words substantial compliance, that's problematic, because what does substantial compliance even mean? And compliance is a word that is reserved, it's a term reserved for the law. Compliance does not refer to technical standards that are voluntary. So substantial compliance is problematic because that means there are accessibility issues. And then if that is the case, right, then if there are no accessibility issues, then it would be fully conformant. But if there are, then the word substantial is problematic, because then that opens the door to accessibility issues existing, and you don't want to have that. So any good documentation is going to be aligned with the exact state of accessibility as it exists on the date that the documentation was issued. So here I have here that there's the date, you have the asset name, you have the issuer, you have the URLs, pages, or screens that are involved, and any other relevant details. One other relevant detail being the technical standard that the digital asset was evaluated against. The point here is we want to make sure that we have a very accurate accounting and everything is detailed and set. If these details are missing, it is going to take away from the potency of the certification. Then in the next column, I have no overlays, no overlay widgets. So the reputation is trash is what I have here on this first bullet point. It will reflect poorly upon you if you go to a sophisticated procurement agent and you present this documentation from an overlay widget seller, and they are going to instantly, they're going to disregard that documentation. So I have here this next bullet point. The question, I'm just imagining the procurement agent asking, you went to an overlay widget seller for certification. And then there's the next question, have you seen overlay fact sheet? Again, the reason why I completely disregard overlay widgets is contained in overlay fact sheet. It's a very, it overlay fact sheet is very long. There's a lot to read through, but the more minutes that you spend on that website, the more time you spend reading it, you will understand why overlay widgets are so fundamentally flawed. And it's not just the widgets, it's also the overlays. So keep that in mind. Then on this last column, I have conformance. It's mandatory. So for any certification to actually be to actually be good, to have like a strong certification, you need to have a fully manual audit. There's no way around this, because to certify accessibility is to evaluate and ensure that all accessibility issues have been addressed and resolved. And when I say a fully manual audit, no automation. We're not interested in a hybrid combination of automated and what will be termed as manual testing. No, it needs to be a full, comprehensive audit. And it needs to be fully manual. And yes, you can use an automated scan as a review, but here we are only interested in a fully manual audit because we want to make sure that we know of all of the accessibility issues that exist, and we need validation. So it's not enough to audit, because once we audit, we're going to identify those accessibility issues that exist. Then we need to ensure that all of the fixes take place. That's where we're going to validate those fixes to ensure that they have actually resolved the issue. And there is no close enough. And that's what I have on this last bullet point. There is no close enough. You should not be able to finesse or pressure a provider into issuing you certification because you are close, or because you have have the changes in staging and they're about to publish them. No, the digital asset needs to actually, the digital asset named in the documentation needs to be actually conformant, with no uncertainty, no ambiguity, nothing, again, no uncertainty regarding the accessibility. This needs to be a one-to-one, and that's why I stated that there needs to be the details in the document so that we know that we are aligned with the state of accessibility when we are issuing the documentation or the certification. So another possibility here is that you can get a report from a provider, and a report won't necessarily be certification, but it can list out any issues that exist and state that the digital asset is otherwise conformant. So here again, we are aligning with the state of accessibility. This is what's important. We need to carry forward what actually is the reality, not what we want the reality to be, not that what we're saying the reality is or what it's about to be, but what is the actual state of accessibility. And as someone seeking out certification, just be aware that you want that stringent requirement, because otherwise, if the provider can be finessed, or if the provider can be pressured into issuing certification, just not going to mean what you want it to, because you want the certification that is difficult to get. You do not want the certification that is easy to get, because it doesn't have that same weight. And also on the slide, by the way, I have the certified accessible seal from accessible.org. And this is what comes with our certification. We will issue you an actual document that states out all of these details. But this is what's in play with certification. And by the way, it's not going to be certification of compliance. It's going to be certification of conformance, because compliance deals with the legal side. That's going to come from an authority, a regulatory authority. It's not going to come from a digital accessibility company. It could come from a government, etc. So keep that in mind. It's not certification of compliance, but if you are following, if you are conformant with the technical standard that is required for conformance, you can see how that gets directly at what you want. So let's say the actual requirement, we know the ADA Title II Web Rule requires WCAG 2.1 AA conformance. So if we have documentation that states that our website or our other digital asset is WCAG 2.1 AA conformant, that works very well, right? That leads right into compliance. Although it's not certification of compliance, it is the next best thing, and it is very, very close to that. So this is what to think about when you're seeking out certification. It's not, you definitely want someone who has a good reputation. You want someone who is experienced. It's not that someone who is new couldn't issue you good certification, but you do want an established provider. And you also want to stay away from any companies who have a bad reputation. But otherwise, there are different documents that can either be certification themselves or have the effect of certification. And there's one more point I wanted to make. Also, I recommend just keep staying open to the idea of different documents, because what can happen is it can be difficult to actually be fully conformant. So sometimes clients will have third-party integrations that introduce accessibility issues, and they are highly reliant upon these integrations. So let's just take the example of a restaurant. Let's say a restaurant has a reservation application embedded in their website, and that app, they cannot edit it because it is the code is controlled by that third-party reservation application, and they can't get them to change it, whatever the case is. So accessibility issues still exist, but even so, you can still make in this case, the website fully conformant otherwise, and then you could have a report that of everything that is conformant, and then other than these issues. So there's actually a document from the W3C that goes right along with the statement of conformance, and I can't remember the exact term, but I think it's a statement of partial conformance. Let me look here and see if I can see this. If I wrote about this in the blog post, let me see. Partial. No, I didn't write it, but I know I have a video about this, and I'm just searching accessible.org now because I want to see what the exact name of it is. No, what's happening is it's returning results that include the word partial, but the point is that you can get documentation that including an ACR that speaks to the fact that you are nearly conformant. And so what's going to happen is that won't be certification, but it will be documentation that just represents that you have really strong accessibility outside of a few issues. And note that having a few issues, although undesirable, especially given all of the regulations and laws, it's having a few accessibility issues, even if there are a few outstanding, it's not that bad. And that actually, you can read about that when it comes to VPATs and ACRs. It's quite common for products to have one or a few issues, and that's just because full conformance requires a great effort, and sometimes it can be practically difficult. And I go through this with clients a lot. They want certification, they want to know that they're fully conformant. They want to be WCAG 2.1 AA conformant, and there are practical or technical limitations that just prevent that from being the case. And so they might have a few issues. And even though we always want to be pristine, we want to be perfect, I will say that a report that goes to speak of your accessibility and just identifies a few issues is still strong documentation. So keep that in mind. So if you would like to learn more about documentation and how we can help you at accessible.org, I will include a contact link in the description along with the links to all of the websites and the pages that I have gone through in this video.